They think pain makes you weak. They think if they hurt you, you'll bleed, beg, or break. Funny thing is, pain doesn't always scream. Sometimes it smiles. When a man hurts you, he expects tears, anger, explanations. What he doesn't expect is silence with strategy, a mind that stops reacting and starts observing. Tonight, this isn't about revenge. It's about confusion. Because the most dangerous response isn't fighting back. It's becoming unreadable. And once he can't predict you, he's already lost. Silence is misunderstood by people who rely on noise to feel powerful. They think words are weapons, explanations are control, and reactions are proof that they still matter. So when you stop explaining, their world starts wobbling. They expect a defense, an argument, a justification, something they can twist and use to stay on top. Silence denies them that luxury. It removes the stage, turns off the spotlight, and leaves them talking to their own echo. That's when confusion begins to crawl into their mind, slow and uncomfortable. When a man hurts you, he assumes pain will pull words out of you. He expects emotional transparency because it makes you predictable. Predictability is comfort for someone who wants control. Silence shatters that comfort. It forces him to sit with unanswered questions. Why aren't you reacting? Why aren't you chasing closure? Why aren't you angry, crying, or demanding clarity? His mind starts creating stories to fill the gap you refuse to fill for him. Humans hate empty spaces, especially emotional ones. Silence becomes a mirror, and most people don't like what they see when no one distracts them from it. Explaining yourself is often mistaken for maturity, but in the wrong hands it becomes a confession. Every word you offer reveals where you're still attached, where you're still wounded, where pressure will work again. Silence protects those details. It keeps your inner map hidden. The more you explain, the more you hand over instructions on how to hurt you better next time. Silence says nothing and therefore gives nothing. It turns the dynamic upside down. Suddenly, he's the one searching for meaning, replaying conversations, dissecting moments, wondering where he lost access. There's a special kind of panic that comes from not being needed for closure. He thought he'd be the final chapter in your emotional story. Silence removes him from the narrative entirely. No reactions, no long messages, no emotional paragraphs at midnight, just distance. Not dramatic distance, calm distance. That's the kind that unsettles people who thrive on emotional leverage. Silence doesn't argue with his version of events. It doesn't correct him. It lets him believe whatever he wants while you quietly detach from the need to be understood by someone who already chose not to understand. Silence also shifts your power inward. You stop performing pain. You stop translating your feelings into language meant for someone who caused them. Instead of external validation, you start regulating yourself. That's dangerous in a way people don't expect. A person who no longer needs to explain themselves is a person who has stopped seeking permission to move on. Silence trains emotional discipline. It teaches you to sit with discomfort without exporting it. That self-control changes your energy. People feel it even if they can't name it. You become harder to read, harder to manipulate, harder to provoke. Confusion is born when expectations collapse. He expected noise. He got quiet. He expected access. He got distance. He expected you to need him to understand your pain. You didn't ask him for anything. Silence doesn't announce strength. It demonstrates it, not loudly, casually, like it's not even trying. And that's what makes it unsettling. Because if you can stay silent after being hurt, it suggests you've already started winning a game. He didn't know he was losing. And while he's still trying to figure out what move comes next, you're no longer playing the same game. You're watching, detached, composed, letting his uncertainty grow while your clarity sharpens. And the quiet between you becomes louder than anything you could have said. Emotional withdrawal feels cruel only to those who benefit from your emotional availability. When you stop feeding the connection, the dynamic doesn't collapse instantly, it malfunctions. He was used to access to reactions, to emotional transparency that allowed him to predict your moves. Withdrawal interrupts that pattern like a skipped heartbeat. Suddenly, the rhythm he depended on is gone. No updates, no emotional check-ins, no visible wounds, just absence. And absence has a way of making people obsess over what they no longer control. When you emotionally withdraw, you're not disappearing, you're relocating your energy. He expects your feelings to orbit around his actions. Hurt equals reaction. Distance equals punishment. But emotional withdrawal isn't punishment, it's neutrality. And neutrality is terrifying to someone who thrived on emotional influence. He can't tell if you're angry, healed, plotting, or indifferent. The mind hates ambiguity more than rejection. Rejection has shape, ambiguity has none. It leaves too much room for imagination, and imagination is rarely kind when guilt or ego is involved. People confuse emotional withdrawal with weakness because they mistake loud emotions for strength. But real strength is the ability to disengage without announcement. You don't block dramatically. You don't explain why you're pulling back. You simply stop offering emotional reactions as currency. That sudden shift forces him into analysis mode. Every interaction becomes suspicious. Every neutral response feels loaded. Every silence feels intentional. He starts reading between lines that no longer exist, trying to decode a message you're not sending. Withdrawal rewires the power balance. Before, he knew how to push and pull. He knew which words would trigger reassurance, which behaviors would spark confrontation, which silences would make you reach out. Emotional withdrawal erases that manual. He's left pressing buttons that no longer work. That's where confusion deepens. When old strategies fail, people don't adapt immediately, they spiral. They question themselves, replay moments, look for cracks. Meanwhile, you're conserving energy, no longer bleeding emotions into someone who proved they couldn't be trusted with them. There's also a psychological mirror effect at play. When you withdraw emotionally, he's forced to confront his own emotional dependency. The attention, the reactions, the reassurance you provided were regulating him more than he realized. Your absence exposes that. Suddenly, he feels unsettled, restless, irritated without knowing why. He may accuse you of being cold, distant, changed. What he's really reacting to is the loss of emotional supply. Confusion isn't just about not understanding you. It's about being confronted with himself without your emotions cushioning the impact. Emotional withdrawal isn't passive. It's deliberate self-protection. You're choosing not to leak feelings into an unsafe space. That restraint changes your internal posture. You become observant instead of reactive, calm instead of chaotic. That calmness unsettles people who expected emotional storms. It doesn't match the narrative they built in their head. They thought hurting you would create chaos they could manage. Instead, it created silence they can't control. And the longer you maintain that withdrawal without hostility or explanation, the more the imbalance grows. He starts questioning his relevance. Was he ever as important as he thought? Did he lose you, or did you simply outgrow the need to respond? The uncertainty eats at him because it offers no clear enemy, no argument to win, no door to slam. Emotional withdrawal denies closure, and without closure, the mind loops endlessly, trying to regain footing in a dynamic that no longer exists while you stand outside of it, composed, detached, watching the confusion take shape as he searches for emotional signals that are no longer available to him. Unpredictability is a weapon most people don't see coming because they are trained to expect patterns. Humans crave patterns. They need them to feel safe, to feel in control, to measure their power over others. But when you become unpredictable, when your actions no longer fit the expected script, it's disorienting. It forces him to constantly guess, constantly recalibrate, constantly fear making a wrong move. And fear, my dear, is far more potent than anger. Confusion is stronger than confrontation because confrontation is finite. It has rules. It can be negotiated. Confusion lingers. Confusion grows. Confusion isolates. When someone hurts you, they assume that pain will bind you into a predictable reaction: anger, tears, pleading. They expect scripts. But unpredictability is the absence of script. It is the refusal to feed into the narrative they want to write for you. One day you're silent. The next you smile at something insignificant, and he can't figure out why. One moment you're present and polite, the next distant and detached. And suddenly he's analyzing every word, every look, every pause. That inconsistency, it's a subtle form of chaos, like a puzzle missing pieces. And humans cannot rest with missing pieces. Unpredictability isn't about randomness, it's about control. The control of your own mind, your own energy, your own responses. It's the art of being unreadable while remaining completely aware. He will try to predict your moves. He will try to calculate, to strategize, to manipulate. But when the rules of interaction keep shifting, when cause and effect no longer line up, he starts to doubt his intelligence, his perception, his understanding of reality. That doubt is exquisite. It gnaws at confidence. It corrodes certainty. And a man who loses certainty about you loses leverage over you. It's beautiful in its quiet destruction. Predictable reactions are gifts handed over freely, a roadmap to one's weaknesses. Unpredictability closes that roadmap. It forces him to question himself. Did I misread her? Did I overstep? Am I too controlling? And all the while you remain calm, detached, almost indifferent. That indifference is the final twist, because it suggests mastery. It suggests that whatever he is doing, whatever he is thinking, it no longer matters. And that power is intoxicating when wielded silently. People underestimate the subtle art of unpredictability because they confuse it with chaos. Chaos is loud. Chaos screams. Chaos is visible, but it's also manageable if you can read the signals. Unpredictability is silent. It's invisible until it has already altered the emotional landscape. He cannot respond effectively because the rules are always shifting. Your mood, your attention, your reactions, they are no longer tools he can exploit. You become a moving target, a question mark he cannot solve. That tension is a slow, burning fire, and the fire of uncertainty is the most uncomfortable kind of heat because it exists inside the mind, in private thoughts, in unspoken anxieties. And the beauty is that unpredictability doesn't need effort. It doesn't need games or manipulation. It's a natural consequence of self-possession, of refusing to bend to expectations that were never fair to begin with. Each unpredictable act reinforces your autonomy. Every calm smile after he expects chaos, every quiet decision when he expects drama, every refusal to explain yourself when he expects answers. It all compounds. He begins to realize that control is slipping through his fingers, not because you're playing a game, but because you simply stopped playing by his rules. In the end, unpredictability is the ultimate equalizer. It levels the field without aggression. It disarms without confrontation. It confuses without chaos. And the more he searches for patterns in your behavior, the less he finds. The more he doubts, the more he spirals, while you walk forward, collected, unshakable, entirely outside the cage of expectation, letting the uncertainty do the work that words or anger could never achieve, leaving him to navigate the maze you quietly constructed without ever showing him the exit. Self-mastery is the quiet storm that no one sees coming. It doesn't announce itself with anger or tears. It doesn't demand attention with grand gestures or dramatic confrontations. It grows inside, in silence, in restraint, in choices that go unnoticed but cut deeper than any shouted insult. When a man hurts you, he expects reaction. He expects loss of control, an unraveling that feeds his sense of power. But self-mastery turns that expectation inside out. It says, I control my mind, my energy, my response, and you have no access to it. Pain is an invitation. Some accept it as punishment, some react with rage, others collapse under it. But mastery transforms pain into observation, pain into strategy, pain into detachment. You learn to sit with discomfort without letting it dictate your actions. You learn to feel without performing, to endure without demanding validation. He may have thought that hurting you would change you, bend you, make you visible in ways he could exploit. Instead, you become invisible in a way that matters. You are present without being available, observant without being reactive. And that is the kind of power that rattles people, because it is quiet, subtle, and entirely ungraspable. Most people mistake emotional explosions for strength because they are loud, because they leave footprints. But strength isn't loud. Strength is knowing that you don't have to prove yourself, that no explanation is required, that the world's judgment is irrelevant. He expects you to fight, to explain, to beg, to lash out, and when you refuse, he begins to question himself instead. He can't read you anymore, can't predict your moves, can't even anticipate the next word. Your calmness, your composure, your refusal to be baited, these become his obsession. The more he tries to destabilize you, the more stable you remain. And that is a weapon sharper than any words or actions. Self-mastery also rewires the relationship to your own identity. You stop defining yourself through someone else's perception of you. You stop proving that you are worthy, that you are hurt, that you matter, you exist on your own terms. That independence is disorienting to someone who relied on your reactions as a mirror for their own ego. When a man hurts you, he feeds on the cracks he sees. But self-mastery seals those cracks. You become a fortress of unshakable presence. And in that silence, he begins to fracture, wondering what he missed, what went wrong, what he will never understand. There's a subtle artistry in turning pain into power. Self-mastery teaches you restraint, observation, and timing. It teaches that sometimes the most devastating response is no response at all. The mind that is trained, the emotions that are tempered, the energy that is conserved, these become tools of influence without ever being wielded openly. He cannot manipulate what is disciplined. He cannot provoke what is controlled. Every attempt to destabilize you only reveals his own weaknesses. Every misstep he makes in reading you becomes another lesson in how detached you have grown. And self-mastery is not just defense, it's transformation. Pain becomes data, hurt becomes insight, confusion becomes leverage. The more you practice self-mastery, the more your presence alone becomes a puzzle. He expected vulnerability, but instead he encounters clarity. He expected chaos, but instead he sees composure. He expected reaction, but instead he is faced with observation. The shift is almost imperceptible at first, like a shadow stretching across the floor, but it grows steadily until he is entirely off balance. Mastery is quiet, but it echoes. It doesn't scream, it resonates. It doesn't demand attention, it commands it. And in that quiet resonance, in that calm authority, you find freedom, while he scrambles for a control he never truly had. Watching as the person he thought he could manipulate has already mastered themselves. And in that mastery, he becomes the one trapped in uncertainty, lost in the maze of his own expectations, while you move forward, untouchable, unbothered, unstoppable.